and welcome to Confused Reviews, where a cartoon drawing reviews movies, and the story of The Evil Dead is one that, to this day, I can't fully wrap my mind around. The fact that a handful of aspiring filmmakers poured every ounce of blood, sweat, and more blood into a low-budget horror flick that saw such a rewarding return is inspiring to say the least. After beginning production in the late 70s, going through absolute hell, finishing the film in 1981, and finally releasing theatrically in April of '83, The Evil Dead saw critical and financial success all over the world, despite being slapped with an X rating and even being referred to as a video nasty across video stores. It was already a certified classic, with even people like Stephen King praising the movie, which not only led to that quote being forever marked on every DVD and VHS copy for the rest of time, but also began talks of the inevitable sequel. The concept of a second movie came about as far back as filming of the first movie, where Sam Raimi suggested the idea of throwing Ash through a time portal to the Middle Ages, which we all know would eventually lead to something great, but the gang decided to instead move on to other projects. Crimewave, a comedic crime film that I guarantee you've never heard of until this exact second, was the trio's next venture. Unfortunately, it was subject to all kinds of reviled studio meddling and wound up a box office bomb. Scrambling for what to do next, the obvious choice was that of Evil Dead 2. Enter producer Dino De Laurentiis, who took an interest in Raimi and was persuaded by Stephen King to fund the next movie, and they quickly came to a deal. The only problem was that all of the supporting characters from the original were obviously dead, so the question was, how do we manage to get another group to make their way to the cabin? Well, turns out that wouldn't matter for very long, as the plan for the beginning was to have a recap of the previous movie that would lead into the sequel stuff. However, it was now a clash of two different companies who had ownership of both flicks, and therefore they weren't allowed to use any prior footage from The Evil Dead. So instead, the first 8 minutes of Evil Dead 2 play out as almost a remake, axing Cheryl, Scott, and Shelley, narrowing it down to just Ash and Linda, as well as changing how the events played out slightly. Oh, and it's also got a much more comedic tone blended in with the serious scares, leading to a wild ride that's like no other. So let's dive into this 1987 staple of the genre and see if it's still one of the best scary movies of all time, or is one of the best scary movies of all time. This is Evil Dead 2. So the film begins with some excellent stop motion of the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, as well as some cliff notes as to the backstory of the sacred book.
In the year 1300 AD, the book disappeared.
Thankfully, we'll find out how it wound up back in the 80s soon enough. We bounce through a tunnel to see Ashley J. Williams, played once again by Bruce Campbell, alongside his second Linda, played by Denise Bixler. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a remade recap of the first movie's events, but that isn't really made clear, so the mistake could be made that Ash is simply going to the cabin again with a different person. Now, as much as I'd like to think that to be true, seeing as how much of a buffoon Williams is, that's not the case. Maybe, since time travel is confirmed to be possible, maybe this is a diverging timeline, and Ash, being a notorious drug user, somehow can tap into these other timelines and somehow misremembers what did or didn't happen.
You actually went to school?
Yeah, these halls have some sweet memories. Met my first Linda here.
Hell, he's probably telling this story to someone like an Army of Darkness and forgot about the other three people. They speed their way there, with Ash even showing off his wicked piano skills, and also that Linda already has that stupid necklace. Hopefully they were able to get a real silver one this time around. Linda's not too keen on roaming about a cabin with the chances of the owners returning at any possible second, so Ash tries defusing the situation with a bottle of the bubbly. He then notices that right next to the booze is a mysterious, somewhat familiar tape recorder, and immediately pops it on to hear its contents. The narration of one Professor Noby, played by John Peaks, reveals his never-ending quest to translate the book, visiting the abandoned site of Kandar, and also looking like a mission Indiana Jones would take on. Raymond then flawlessly transcribes the passage, causing the evil force to smash into Linda's window. Man, these Jehovah's Witnesses are out of control. Ash makes his way outside, only to see that Linda's feeling a little under the weather and prescribes a quick decapitation. He eventually digs up the grave and... she went from a doll face...
We're gonna get you, not another piece.
...to a doll body. The Force then runs through the house, eventually leading exactly where we left off, but with a slight change. See, it's pretty obvious Ash was supposed to have been killed at the tail end of the first movie, with the evil finally catching up with him. But considering Ash and evil demons go together as well as peanut butter and lighter fluid, they decided to instead have the guy flung through the air for what feels like an eternity and splash into a disgusting puddle. Apparently, this shot took an entire day of shooting, all for 5 seconds of movie. He takes a quick nap and wakes up to see that he's not doing too hot either, but even the sun knows how truly badass Ashy Slashy is, so it rises quickly and causes all the evil to revert. Hey man, we've all been there. One more projected demon face is all it takes for Ash to take his cream-colored baby and get the fuck out of there, realizing pretty quickly that a Nosferatu-shaped bridge is holding him back. We then see, in a beautiful shot, that the sun is setting in record time. I mean, yeah, it's been daylight for like 45 seconds, so time to go dark again. He also sees something sinister coming for the car, so he goes all fast and furious and... Come on, man, you should know the rules.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Ash realizes he left the stove on in the cabin and rushes back to it, leading to what is such an amazing one-shot take that to this day, and probably 100 separate viewings of this movie, it still blows my mind how flawlessly it was pulled off. Anyways, Mr. Williams proves to be quite good at hide-and-seek, as even the evil can't find him, so it decides to just come back later. We then hop over to Lauchi's escape plane to see Annie Noby, played by Sarah Bailey, as well as her boy toy Ed, played by Richard Demere. Fred Jones here is filled in on the recently discovered pages just as we roll back to the cabin to see Ash taking a quick rest. His downtime is cut short as we see that the piano is playing itself, with Rick and Morty being tortured behind it. The jazzy tune gets him all nostalgic for his lost love and the terrible necklace she once wore. Wait a second, I didn't put in Return of the Living Dead. Oh shit. Anywho, Linda pops back to life, looking like an extra from Halloween Town, dancing about and even getting her noggin back. Also, the stop motion here is top notch and looks so clean.
Hello there.
She attacks him again with hair that looks a lot more pinned up than it does in the next shot, and we see that Ash is most likely having a manic episode. And Linda's head falls from the ceiling to taunt him.
Hello, lover.
Talk about rough head. Get it?
What?
Ash then spends the next few minutes violently bashing her cranium against everything in the cabin, falling over an oil drum, and making his way to the work shed and loosening her grasp by putting her in a vice grip. This sequence is equally hilarious as it is horrifying, with the thought of sharp teeth clamped onto your hand freaking you out alongside Bruce's great physical slapstick. It's absolutely... Wait a minute! Apparently Freddy built his iconic weaponry in this shed. Okay, not really, but prepare for another tangent. Way back in Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes, he purposely put a torn poster for Jaws on the wall, symbolizing that his film was eons scarier than Spielberg's, so when Sam Raimi was making the first Evil Dead, he put a poster for that movie in the cellar to tell Wes, and I quote, "No, this is real horror, pal."
It's the motherfucking DRE. Dr. Dre, motherfucker.
Years later, when A Nightmare on Elm Street rolled around, the friendly war continued with Nancy watching The Evil Dead to try and stay awake, but she keeps nodding off while viewing. Flashing ahead to Raimi's sequel, he jabbed back by having Krueger's glove shown several times throughout the movie. But it doesn't end there, as in 1996, when Craven revived the slasher genre with Scream, Randy holds a pile of videotapes that just so happens to contain, you guessed it, The Evil Dead. Thankfully, the tradition lives on, as even after Wes Craven's unfortunate passing in 2015, Ash vs. Evil Dead revealed not one, but two callbacks to his infamous work. But gets even more confusing, being that Freddy, Ash, and Jason are all confirmed to be in the same universe. Jason Goes to Hell, as shitty as it is technically canon, and had the Necronomicon and Kandarian dagger in it, with the very end having Freddy's arm pull Jason's mask underground, and you know what that would eventually lead to. With an added bonus being, not only the three appearing in comics and other crossovers together, but an idea tossed around for Freddy vs. Jason was to have Ash Williams either appear at the end or verse the two in an eventual sequel. So how the hell did Nancy watch that movie in a universe where Ash is supposed to be a real guy? Am I overthinking all this? What were we talking about? Evil Dead 2? Back to the movie, the possessed head rifles through all kinds of emotions to manipulate, but that isn't working, so her body busts in trying to slice and dice Ash. One swift crowbar swipe later sends the saw into her headless corpse and spraying black sludge everywhere. Ew. To end off this great set of mind games, we see a Hitchcock silhouette of Linda being disposed of. At least he didn't do what they did in Casino. He runs back to the cabin, tosses out his chainsaw, and instead grabs a shotgun and decides to check himself out in the mirror, as well as asking who's the fairest of them all.
Thelonious...
You were saying?
Honestly, that's one of the simplest yet effective jump scares in cinematic history. It's way better than the water mirror from the original, and puts every other instance of the trick to shame. Turns out it was all an illusion, and really, Ash was just kinda getting kinky, and his recently bitten hand starts to get a tad bit infected. No time for that as we find out Annie and Ed are trying to make their way back to the wooden shack, only to find out what we already know.
You ain't going there.
And why not?
You're fucked.
Jake, played by Dan Hicks, and Bobby Joe, played by Cassie Wesley, fill the two in on another way to get back to the cabin. Meanwhile, Ash tries drowning the evil out of his hand, but proceeds to get attacked by everything but the kitchen sink. Bruce Campbell actually did all of these crazy stunts, with an impressive somersault as a bonus. Shit, he could rival Johnny Knoxville or Tom Cruise. Ash is rightfully knocked out, with his clumsy old meat hook making its way towards a cleaver on the ground. Yup, he stabbed his own hand. And I suppose this is as good a time as any to give immense praise to the special effects guys, including Mark Shostrom, who did work on From Beyond and Elm Street 2 before getting this gig. He was terrified this wouldn't work. Thankfully for all of them and the audience, it's brutal, and it doesn't end there, as he takes extreme measures by grabbing the chainsaw and... you know the rest. I mean, I would have tried putting some Neosporin on, but yeah, that works too. We get a great sight gag, only for Ash to patch himself up and the not-so-idle hand getting out of there, only to express his thoughts on the matter. Ash is fuming now and tries one final time to take down Thing, but... this blood faucet was actually the last scene they filmed, for obvious reasons. Thankfully for Ash, it turns into venom piss and redacts into the wall. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, we see Charlie's been fucking with the chair.
You didn't do anything that special.
That's how you make a joke stool right there.
Ow, Charlie!
Oh, and all the stuff in the cabin, including the trophy deer, books, and even the cabinet start laughing at our bloodied hero. The chuckles are so infectious that even Ash can't resist joining in, plus he starts busting a move with the Pixar lamp. Man, that was a weird sentence. The house party is cut short when suspicious noises outside cause Ash to shoot first and ask questions later.
A few moments later.
He manages to get a few good shots in, but Ed's assistance helps Jake to incapacitate him. Supposedly, Dan Hicks actually knocked Bruce's front teeth loose due to a misjudged slap, with that take actually in the movie. Man, Ash got the shit kicked out of him on and off camera. Annie gets a tiny bit upset thinking he killed her parents, so they toss his ass into the fruit cellar. He reacted a lot more modestly than I think he should have.
I hope you rot down there.
Fuck!
Annie decides to throw on some tunes to get her mind off it, but gets a recording of her dear old dad instead, who reveals that Henrietta was taken over after reading the cantation, and coincidentally was buried.
God help me, I buried her in the fruit cellar.
Campbell's actually got a scream to rival Jamie Lee Curtis. Weird. He begins screaming his head off. No, not like that, in hopes that they'll let him out, which they do in a nail-biter of a scene. She even roughs them all up pretty good, with some getting it worse than others. Can't imagine that tastes all that great. Ash begins filling them in on their current predicament, just as the pesky bitch in the basement turned back into Lou Hancock, and not Ted Raimi, trying to get Annie to let it out. Ash puts a stop to that pretty easily. That's good, things seem to be winding down for a second. I love Ed's possessed look, not only sporting more teeth than a great white, but also the fact that he's so tuned in with the Force, he floats. Never mind the obvious black wires suspending him in the air either, that's just stuff. Anyways, Ed and the now remorphed Henrietta start chanting Dead by Dawn, which was actually the movie's tagline at one point.
Swallow your soul! Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn.
Ed wolfs down some of Bobby Joe's hair, for nutrition, as well as almost letting the cellar dweller free, but Ash ain't having none of that. First off, I think Evil Ed is my favorite Kandarian demon look of all the movies. It looks so wildly outlandish and scary at the same time. And there was actually more to this death than what we see in the movie. When Ash cuts his head off, it was supposed to reveal a tiny brain inside. They then swapped this out and gave him ecto-cooler blood in hopes of not getting an X rating. Which didn't work anyway, so why didn't they just put in this great effect actor? And with a few more swipes, we bid farewell to dead Ed and Eddie. What the fuck was that? Now with only 4 remaining players, we get a shot that I love so much I wish I could print it out and put it on my wall. The house starts freaking out again, with another projected ghost face whispering creepy plot stuff to the characters. Professor Nobi explains that those missing pages are the key to all of it.
Everybody got that? Good.
The gang continues to wait around.
Jake, you're holding my hand too tight.
Baby, I ain't holding your hand.
Until Bobby Joe gets attacked by the hand and the joint goes dark. I guess she decided forget Jake and runs out of there, and she runs directly into a spooky tree that wraps her up in a familiar series of events, but instead of being defiled by it, it just jabs roots into her face and sends her back to the weeds. The 3 amigos, more so just Ash and Annie, look over the new pages and even discover a King of the Hill style depiction of a saw-wielding, boomstick-holding hero from the sky. Wonder who that is. Jake the hillbilly bastard tries playing hero and even tosses the needed passages into the cellar.
Not cool, dudes.
He sends them into the outside world in hopes of finding Bobby Joe and screams like a toddler until attracting the attention of a certain demonic force. Now, which one of our 3 characters do you think it takes? It grabs Ash. Jesus Christ. He throws Jake like a pro wrestler and even taunts Annie from the porch. Evil Ash tries to huff and puff the door down, but it doesn't work, so she just waits by the door and stabs Jake by mistake?
Whoops.
And to make matters worse, she yanks out the dagger and leaves him vulnerable to a Henrietta attack, who drags his body into the cellar and sprays up a comedic amount of blood.
Now this is a classic motion picture.
This is groundbreaking.
This is what classic motion pictures are all about. Where you find out that the guy had more blood than a rhinoceros.
That's a hell of a way to go, even though you were kind of a prick. Annie, now drenched in blood, awaits the next deadite debacle. Probably the most shocking thing I learned about this movie is that Evil Ash somehow managed to give Campbell an even larger chin, which is something I would have never noticed without this behind-the-scenes footage. Evil Ash tosses Annie across the room, and right as he goes in for the kill, he starts having a hissy fit after grabbing that goddamn necklace. Well, at least it causes the evil to vanish once again. Too bad Annie's not so convinced.
Damn it! I said I was all right!
No, you're not. You're missing your right hand. Ash finally gets back on Annie's good side, but the celebration doesn't last too long, as the pages they need have wound up in the basement alongside Big Bertha. So, the moment we've all been waiting for is upon us. The 2 rush out into the workshed, and we see one of the best tooling up montages in cinematic history, with Ash gearing up a chainsaw hand and sawing the barrels off his boomstick. Oh, and he says something kind of cool, too.
Groovy.
Best sequence of the movie. Hands down. He hops down into the cellar, immediately finding one of Slender's 8 pages and another Freddy glove. No time for that, as Jake's skeleton gives him a quick scare, and he collects all the paper.
Pages, quick!
That's probably the most unrealistic thing in the whole movie. Everyone knows if you throw any paper, it turns into a fucking tornado. Just as Ash is about to escape, Henrietta knocks him out and launches out of the basement to attack Annie. And here are 2 things that are both interesting and kinda disgusting. First, you can see a giant tear in the ass of the suit, which is hilarious. But in the same token, here's Ted Raimi sweating out of the ear of the costume, which is repulsive and makes me feel like I should give another huge salute to Ted for manning up and wearing that shit for hours at a time. I can't even wear a certain burn victim's face for more than 25 minutes at a time without having a panic attack. They tussle a bit more until the undead bitch morphs into a giraffe demon? Again, the stop-motion animation here is fantastic, and even manages to look better than the CGI version that was done almost 30 years later. Annie distracts the fucker with another lullaby, and Ash puts the saw to work, hacking it to bits. But even after being ripped to pieces, it's still not done.
Swallow this.
The level of manliness in that phrase just made me grow a full Kurt Russell the Thing beard. They have a quick hug, but before they can finish up, they have to give the evil a physical form, which causes the cabin to turn into fucking Monster House. Oh, and a gnarly pizza face too, which is something, I guess. The sight of the monster causes the plants to die and Ash to grow some gray hair. And now that I think of it, Bruce Campbell would make a great Mr. Fantastic. Annie tries finishing the spell, but Ash's hand has other plans, literally stabbing her in the back. But thankfully, she's equally badass, using her final moment to end it. Phew, good thing all that's over. Just kidding, the portal begins pulling everything in, including our one-handed hero. He floats around in 2001's light shenanigans, eventually exploding back into existence. He and the classic are now in a different spot, only to be bombarded with knights. They plan to do the classic stab it cause we don't know what it is, but a familiar creature busts in to immediately get blasted.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang! You guys all think I'm a hero, and I'll accept that responsibility.
And here lies the only thing I don't like about this movie. This Deadite.
No. Don't like that.
However, there is an explanation I found that kinda, sorta makes up for it. Supposedly Sam didn't want the makeup effects guys on set for the finale, so when the final flying demon was imposed in the scene, 99% of it was unusable, which led to the only bad effect in the movie. And while that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and might not be true, I prefer 100 bad practical effects versus one really bad CGI attempt. Just saying. The medieval maniacs pressure him to be the chosen one, hailing to the king, with Ash not too psyched about it. And that was Evil Dead 2, and come on, we all know it's one of the greats. That being said, I was genuinely surprised at how much fun I had rewatching this thing, even though I've seen it so many times before. This flick is relentless in what it tries to do, with every scene packed to the brim with all kinds of Evil Dead goodness that have become staples of the horror genre and the series as a whole. Creepy cabin? Check. Group of mostly unsuspecting victims? Check. Insane and intense gore that keeps going throughout the whole runtime? Check. And check. But what it manages to do with its simple premise is something that I don't think has or will ever be replicated again. Not only does it have a great story with so many different things going on all at the same time, and of course some of the best practical effects of all time, but the thing I think this movie does best of all is keeping you glued to the screen from start to end. It is always either creating suspense that's slowly creeping up on you, or executing brilliant scares and possessions. It takes everything the first movie did perfectly, improves on it, and even manages to sprinkle in some hilarious moments in physical comedy. Also, seeing everything it took to put this project together was a real eye-opener. It's so amazing seeing all the work and time put in by everybody, especially the special effects crew, including Mark Shostrom, the VFX wizard Greg Nicotero, Bob Kurtzman, and many, many more. The BTS footage from the makeup crew was so much fun to watch and shows what a great time everyone had making this crazy movie. Well, aside from Ted Raimi, who was brutally punished playing Henrietta, sweating profusely and constantly getting dirt kicked into his eyes. Thankfully, he would eventually get his time to shine out of costume as Chet in Ash vs. Evil Dead. But in terms of this movie, he's great too. And it wouldn't be a complete Evil Dead review without acknowledging Ash Williams. Bruce Campbell is obviously fantastic, not only committing to most of the stunts and slapstick, but really manages to flesh out the character more so than the first, with his badass nature and amazing one-liners replacing his quiet and once fearful demeanor. The best way I can describe Ash in this movie is that he's what all three Stooges combined would look like. That is, if they were missing a hand and were constantly covered in blood. Overall, I love this movie, and aside from one bad effect at the very end, it's practically perfect. Excellent cast that all feels real and natural, top-notch effects that hold up over 30 years later, and works as a blend of horror, comedy, splatter flicks, and even a hint of action thrown in. It's one of those lightning-in-a-bottle movies that couldn't ever possibly be matched or redone, and deserves to be recognized as such. It's a great time that seems to work even better the more times I see it, and is my personal favorite of the whole series. I'm going to give Evil Dead 2... If you somehow haven't seen it, the fuck is wrong with you? Because it's not only one of my favorite horror flicks, but is one of my favorite movies. Hats off to Sam Raimi's excellent direction and vision, Bruce Campbell's performance that carries the movie, and the rest of the cast and crew for creating this work of bloody, messy art. I'm Confused Reviews. Thanks for watching.